Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Jaded Blossom has a brand new mini winter release and it's absolutely adorable. And as you can see from the photo, there is a new gnome add-on set. If you are interested in any of the products, I do have links provided in the description box below. So let me show you everything that's included in the release. The first item is Gnoel Word Die. Currently, this is not available for purchase. It's the freebie that you'll receive if you order at least $50 of products, and one of the items has to be from the new release. And the freebie is only available on Thursday, December 15th, and while supplies last. Next up is the stamp set Gnoel Gnome, and there is a coordinating outline die set. There's 2 sentiments, Warm Winter Wishes, and Noel, and then we have an adorable gnome image. The next stamp set is Winter Candies Grid Style. So we have a few sentiments on the side, to and from, Snowflake Kisses, Snowman Soup, and then a larger snowflake. Then we have all the small images and sentiments, and they're grouped together in sets of 9, and they work well with Jaded Blossom's Grid Candy die set. You can add them to the bottom of a small candy, or you can have the gnomes hold them. And here's a look at the brand new gnome add-on set. This is winter and it's so much fun. There are 3 new hats, earmuffs, a scarf, a sled for your gnome to sit on, and then new items for the gnome to hold. There's snowflakes, a little moose mug, a small snowman, and a cardinal. And there are even pieces so you can create a snow gnome. And there is a new sentiment set. This is Winter is Gnoming. Lots of really fun sentiments, and there's also the coordinating outline dies, and I love to have the outline dies to go with the sentiments. There is one small image. We have a little snowflake, and a few of the sentiments. We have I melt for you, sending you a flurry of gnome kisses, hello winter, Gnomey, it's cold outside, and lots more. Jaded Blossom always has such fun sentiments. There are 2 new stencil sets. The set on the left is Falling Snow, and the set on the right is Snowflake. These will be perfect for creating your own background. I do have a few cards to share with you today using the new release. For most of the cards, the pattern paper I'll be using is from Catherine Pooler. This is Touch of Frost, and it is a slimline size paper collection. For card design number 1, I'm using a card sketch from Sketch Saturday. This is number 715. This is one of their newer sketches and it looks like so much fun. I couldn't resist trying it. And I really like how the card turned out. I selected 2 of the pattern papers, and I also have a strip of light teal cardstock with a pearlescent finish, and I'll add that to the very top. I'm layering everything on some dark blue cardstock. With the pattern paper being on the narrower side, it's only 3.5 inches wide. A sketch like this is perfect. I'll add the plaid paper down first, put adhesive on the back, adhere it onto the panel, then I'll flip it over, use my scissors to trim off the extra. Then I'll do the same thing for the snowflake pattern paper, adding it on the left side. I thought about layering the snowflake pattern paper on the same dark blue cardstock, but I thought it would be too bold. So instead I'll add some Love from Lizzie peel-offs along the very edge of that snowflake pattern paper. This is the clear iridescent glitter with the silver overlay finish. Using the widest width, putting one just along that very outside edge. Then I'll cut down the pieces just a little bit longer than what I need. I'll use my craft knife and miter the corner so I have this perfect little frame going around that snowflake pattern paper. And it adds a lot of sparkle without any of the glitter mess. Next, I'll flip over my card panel, use my scissors to trim off the very ends of the peel-offs. I'll layer this panel on the dark blue cardstock. Then I'll add my card front onto a card base, leaving 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. Even though I'm using a slimline size paper collection, all of my cards are American Standard A2 size, 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. Next, I'll add a little girl gnome image, and I thought it would be fun to have her standing up. The legs are from the Christmas add-on set number 1. It's technically Santa's legs, but I thought with the boots it would be perfect for some little snow boots. Now they are designed for the legs to go all the way across like they're doing the splits, but instead I snipped those legs in half, put some adhesive on the back of her skirt, and now she's standing up. Isn't that so much fun? I love the new winter hat. For the trim and the pom-pom, I used some white glitter cardstock, and I decided she'll be holding a snowflake. I'll glue the snowflake down first and then add her two hands. And I did put a very small piece of foam dimension on the back side of her hands. Using a white gel pen, I'll add a few highlights, put some on her hat, her nose, her boots, and also her scarf. I did put a piece of double-sided tape on the back of her legs just to make sure they stayed in place while the glue dried. I will be popping her up using some thin foam dimension. I'll first remove the release paper on the back side of that double-sided tape, then I can add all the foam dimension. And I am using two different sizes of the foam squares. Want to make sure to get good coverage so there isn't one area that sags. Before adhering my little gnome girl down, I will add the sentiment. The sentiment, I've already stamped and cut this out. Know me, it's cold outside. Using the outline die, I cut out a second piece from the dark blue cardstock, and I'll layer those two pieces together so now there's a drop shadow of that blue cardstock showing. And I will pop up the sentiment using some thin foam dimension. I'll add the sentiment first, more on the left side of the card, so I am altering this sketch just a little bit. Once my sentiment is in place, I can add my little girl Nomi, and she's basically standing right on top of that sentiment. I cut out two more of the snowflakes, and I'll add those in the upper right hand corner. Just glue those down using liquid adhesive. I use some white shimmer cardstock for the snowflakes, so sometimes it takes just a little bit longer for that glue to adhere a pearlescent finish. I'll place an acrylic block on top for some added weight. Then for a little extra sparkle on the snowflakes, I'll add some more Love from Lizzie peel-offs. This is the mini circle style in the clear iridescent glitter color. I'm using the smallest circle and adding it to the inside of each of the snowflakes. Then for a final finishing touch, I'm adding some glitter stickers, and this is just something from my stash that I've been trying to use up. So there is my finished card, and I did make two using this design. I love this little girl. It reminds me of my daughter when she was younger. Now moving on to card design number 2, I'm using the Falling Snow Stencil. I have a piece of white cardstock, a mini stencil mat, and the ink color is Hot Tub from Catherine Pooler. Using it for all of the snowfall. And then I'll add just a very light coat of the ink over the background so that that piece isn't super white. Next, I'll add a little bit of watercolor splatter. It's a gold mix, but this one is a little more on the silver side. I'll set that aside to dry and start working on the card background. I'm using a card sketch. This is OWH number 200. Now generally I would use one piece of pattern paper for the background, but this is slimline size paper, so I do need to trim it down, and it'll leave just that small gap between the two pieces. But since it'll be covered up, no one will know I didn't use a full panel for the background. I have this beautiful snowflake paper for the very background, adding a gray lattice design and also a narrow strip of striped paper. Between those two strips, I'll add a Love from Lizzie peel-off. This is the teal mirror color in the pinstripe style. Before adhering that piece down, I will add a scrap piece of cardstock in that gap, just to make sure everything is at the same level. Then I'll adhere that narrow panel across the card. Put some ATG tape on the back and add my card front onto a card base, leaving 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. Just to save time on this video, I've already assembled all of the gnomes. So I have a boy gnome wearing another winter hat, and he's holding a little snowman. The two new hats on the winter gnome set are so cute. If you're new to Jaded Blossom's gnome dies, I do have other videos where I show how to assemble the gnomes, and I'll try to remember to put one at the end of this video if you're watching it on YouTube. Now that my little stenciled piece is all dry, I'm adding a small little hillside of snow using some white shimmer cardstock, and I just used my scissors to cut that hillside. Most of it will be covered up with the gnome. Before adhering that piece in place, I'll put some scrap cardstock at the very top and bottom, then I'll adhere it using liquid adhesive. Now I can add my little gnome. The sentiment I've already stamped and cut out. This is Hello Winter. And I did put some foam dimension on the back. I'll adhere that in place in the upper right hand corner. Then for a final finishing touch, I'm adding some embellishments from Studio Katia. This is their Icy Sparkle Crystals. Works perfectly for a winter card. I'll add 3 of them around the sentiment. I'm using an embellishment wand to pick those up, adding just a small drop of Barely Art liquid glue, then pressing them in place. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. For card design number 3, I selected this fun polka dot pattern paper. The larger piece is 3.5 inches by 3 3/4 of an inch, and the bottom piece is 1.5 inches by 3 3/4 of an inch. I'll use both of those to create a background. So there is a small gap between the 2 pieces. I'll cover that up using one of Jaded Blossom's border dies. They have some fun wavy borders in different widths. For the wider width, I used some blue cardstock, and for that narrow width, I used some white shimmer cardstock. And apparently I forgot to trim down that white border, and I already have liquid adhesive on the back, so I'm trying very carefully to trim it down using my scissors. I'm cutting just tiny little pieces off, and I'm trying to trim it down so the wavy design of the wider border will line up together. Then I'll adhere it in place, and luckily the glue hadn't dried on the back of that piece yet. I'll place my acrylic block on top for some added weight while that glue adheres. For the very background, I used some teal cardstock, and I cut it out using one of Jaded Blossom's Scallop Rectangle dies. I'll put adhesive on the back and add my card front onto a card base, and you can see just a peek of that white card base showing around the scallop. I cut out a stitched oval die cut from some pearlescent cardstock, and I'll be using the Snowflake Stencil on top. The ink color is Skylight from Catherine Pooler, and I'll stencil the entire oval to create a fun tone-on-tone snowflake pattern paper design. And even though this cardstock has a pearlescent finish, the Catherine Pooler ink dried very quickly, so I wasn't worried about smudging that design. I'll put liquid adhesive on the back and adhere my oval in place. This card will feature the adorable new Snow Gnome. I used white cardstock for the mustache and beard. I did use some gray ink to add a little bit of detail to the very edge of the beard and mustache before adhering them together. I have the branches for his arms, the carrot for his nose, and decided to go with a dark blue hat with a lighter blue trim. And he's wearing some black shoes. I also used some black cardstock for the lumps of coal for the buttons on his beard. For a sentiment, I've already stamped and cut this out, Warm Winter Wishes, and I'll adhere that in the upper left-hand corner. Then to finish off the card, I'll add some more of the Icy Sparkle Crystals. I'll add 3 around the sentiment and 2 in the lower right-hand corner. This embellishment set has either 3 or 4 different sizes, and I'm trying to use a variety on my card. So there is my finished card, and again I did make 2 using this design. I love how this turned out. The Snow Gnome is absolutely adorable. For card design number 4, I'll be using some pattern paper from Honeybee Designs. This is their Team Tie-Dye collection. I selected this beautiful purple and blue design for the background. I'll be layering it on some dark blue cardstock, but first I'll add some Love from Lizzie peel-offs. This is the silver holographic color in the pinstripe style. I'll add the widest width and also 3 of the narrowest width. I'm using the lines on my craft mat to try to get those peel-offs nice and straight. Generally, if I can get one of them straight, then I don't have any problems with the others. I would have used all 3 widths of the peel-offs, but I don't have any long enough pieces of the medium, so I decided to use the widest and also the narrow, since I have lots of the narrow pieces left. I'll wrap those ends around the back, and before I layer it on the blue cardstock, I'm adding a little melting snowman puddle. I use the inside piece of the frosting from the gingerbread, and this is part of Jaded Blossom's Octagon dies, the Christmas add-on set number 2. I cut it out from some white shimmer cardstock, put adhesive on the back, and adhered it in the lower right-hand corner, leaving part of it hanging off the edge. I'll flip over that panel and use my scissors to trim off the extra. Then I'll layer the background piece on the dark blue cardstock, but decided not to have any of that blue border at the bottom of the card. I'll put some ATG tape on the back and add my card front onto a card base. I've already stamped out the sentiment Snowman Soup, and I used Jaded Blossom's Label Shape die set number 1 for that piece. I'll adhere it in the upper left-hand corner using liquid adhesive. Now I'll start adding all of the snowman pieces for my sad melted snowman. I used some black cardstock for the hat, added a red cardstock band, and I did put foam dimension on the back of the hat. For all of the other pieces, I'll glue them down using liquid adhesive. I'll add the arms first, then the nose. Next, I'll add the eyes and the 3 kohl buttons. And then finally, the hat will sit in the lower left-hand corner, upside down. Whenever we get snow in Western Washington, it usually only hangs out for a couple days. So we've had many years with snowman soup happening just a few days after it snows. My kids learn quickly that if you want to play in the snow, you have to do it right away, since it may be gone the next day. To finish off the card, I'm adding some enamel dots, and these are from Alta New, really pretty blue color. They do have adhesive on the back, but I find that sometimes those enamel dots pop off, so I am adding just a small drop of liquid adhesive. Now moving on to card design number 5. I'm using more of Catherine Pooler's Touch of Frost collection. I selected the gray lattice print for the background. It doesn't go all the way to the bottom since it is the slimline size, but I will be covering up that bottom portion, so it'll still work out just fine. I layered this piece on some dark blue cardstock, and of course I ran out of my ATG tape, so I had to go and reload it. I'll be adding a panel of white shimmer cardstock for snow at the bottom of the card, and I used one of Jaded Blossom's border dies for that fun wavy stitched edge. Before adhering that piece in place, I did put a scrap piece of cardstock underneath the pattern paper. This card will feature the sled, another gnome, and also the cardinal and the little moose mug. There are 3 pieces to the sled. I used brown cardstock for the main background, some silver mirror cardstock for that blade, and blue cardstock for the top portion of the sled. Next, I'll assemble the cardinal. There are 3 pieces. I used a darker red cardstock for the body and the wing. For the little mask and the beak, I have a lighter red cardstock, and I want to add a little bit of black to that mask portion. So I taped that tiny piece on a scrap piece of cardstock using some Distress Oxide ink and a small blending brush to add just that little bit of black down. Then I'll adhere it in place using liquid adhesive. For the eye, you could use some black cardstock and inlay that teeny tiny piece. I decided to use a Love from Lizzie peel-off. This is the bubble design that has been discontinued, but I still have a few sheets of it left, and I love the tiny little dots that are on the inside of that chain design. Some of the dots are so tiny, it kept getting stuck to the end of my tweezers, but I did finally get it in place. I'm using some of the leftover ink on the brush to blend out that mask so it doesn't have that harsh line between the beak and the black mask. Then I'll tuck that bird behind a little snowy hill. Next, I'll add a little girl gnome. She's all bundled up with her hat and scarf. And I know it does look like a Santa hat, but it's not. She just really likes red. I'll have her sit right on top of the sled. And since she's super cold, she'll be wearing a hat and also some earmuffs. Maybe if she put some shoes on, then she wouldn't be quite as cold, but the little gnome feet are just adorable. Before adhering the earmuffs down, I'll put some foam dimension on the outside of her hat on the right and left side. Then I'll put liquid adhesive on the back of the earmuffs and adhere them in place. And if you couldn't tell yet, I was going for patriotic colors for this card. To help warm up my little Gnomie, she'll be drinking some hot cocoa out of this adorable little moose mug. The whipped cream die cut piece is from the Gnome Dies Gingerbread add-on set. Instead of inlaying the eyes on the moose mug, I put a small piece of black cardstock on the back. I will add some foam dimension on the back of the moose mug before adhering it in front of the little girl gnome. Next, I'll attach her hands holding that mug by the antlers. I've already stamped and cut out the sentiment, "Winter is Gnoming." I put some foam dimension on the back and I'll adhere it in the upper right-hand corner. For embellishments, I'm using more of the Icy Sparkle Crystals from Studio Katia. Put 3 of them around the sentiment and 2 on the left side of the little girl gnome. I bought the sparkle crystals years ago and completely forgot that I had them until I was searching for embellishments to add to my winter cards. They're perfect. Then to finish off the card, I'll use a white gel pen and add a few highlights to my bird. I've already added the highlights to my little girl gnome. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. I love how this card turned out. Patriotic colors work for any card theme in my opinion. Now here's another look at the 10 cards I made using Jaded Blossom's brand new mini winter release. If you are interested in any of the products I used in this video, I do have links provided in the description box below. Jaded Blossom always has so many fun products. Their gnome dies are super popular, and it's almost been a full year since their original release, which is really fun. They keep coming out with more and more add-on sets to go along with the gnome dies, so possibilities are endless. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.